Okay.
Okay, lovely. We can start.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to share now. And what does it say? Do I want to share the desktop?
This is the second lesson, English for Environment, SPEN European Erasmus Plus project. Just to introduce very quickly. You will find in the chat the link where you can register your attending to this meeting. Hello to all the partners, project partners, and Gordon Kennedy is, well, continuing to keep on with this lesson. Thank you, Gordon. You can start.
Okay, so thank you, Stefano. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope that everybody is okay today. I have to confess that I was a little bit phased because, of course, we are mostly going to do these things on a Tuesday, whereas today, obviously, it's not Tuesday. So anyway, okay. So what we're going to look at today is we're going to carry on where we started last time, which was a very, very generic, very general introduction to some, let's say, some topics or some themes around the environment, and in particular, we started to introduce some broad ideas around the sort of language that we use for when we are talking about some topics. Now, this first part is very, very generic in the sense that this is language which is fairly everyday. However, what we will do today is once this introductory section, which is really about modern, let's say just some ideas about modern life, is completed, we will move into a second section, which is going to focus more, or going to start to focus more on particular aspects of the environment and the language that we need to talk about the environment. Now, I was thinking about this. I've been sort of pulling together lots of materials and making the materials for the presentations and the lessons, and I was wondering how best to try and present particular linguistic aspects of the topic, and it is actually quite difficult to come up with a let's say something which is not just a grammar lesson, or which is not just a general chat. So you'll have to bear with me in that this is very much a something which is being invented, or it's being made as we go forward. Okay, so hopefully the feedback which comes from this first presentation of this course will feed back into answering specific aspects, specific questions. But above all, I hope that this just gives you a chance to reflect on some ideas and some let's say yes, that it gives you a chance to reflect on some ideas, but also some sorts of approaches that you can maybe take into a classroom, or that you can take into everyday life. So where we got to last time, we talked about transport. We talked a little bit about infrastructure. One of the main, or one of the big, let's say, areas of modern life is around food, of course, because the food system is absolutely fundamental to everybody. We need to eat, okay, and so without going into a lot of detail here, because we're going to look at this in more detail in another session, we have to think about where does our food come from, what is in our food, and why it's there, okay, what should be in our food. So there's a whole sort of set of quite general questions around this, and I wanted to start here with something which is a little bit, well, it's provocative for some people. For an Italian in particular, should you put pineapple on a pizza? This is just a pretext to talk about let's say, the elements, the composition of food. So from an environmental point of view, what we're talking about here is not just that food is prepared, that food is grown or cultivated, that agriculture provides us with food in general. It's actually that this food has some sort of value for us, and this food has biochemical value, energetic value. It has cultural value also. So thinking about food in general, the food is obviously something which is required for nourishment. It's required for the energy that we need to live our daily lives in a healthy way. Of course, for many people with busy lives, it can be extremely difficult to manage to achieve a balanced diet, because if you are pressured for time, it can be difficult to find the time that you need, not only to prepare food, but also to source the food in some way. Food itself, as we all appreciate, I think everybody here, and we've got a number of different countries. I can see someone saying hello from Spain, from Turkey. Just looking at the chat, and I know that there are other people from Italy, and there are people from other places too. We all know that food is a strong expression of identity as well, and so it is an important element of our lives. So we may think about, when we're thinking about food, we may think about where is our food grown, where does it come from, and these days it's easy to find many different things in a supermarket. Our national food is based on meat and potatoes. Yeah, well, when I was growing up, our national food was based on boiled cabbage or boiled Brussels sprouts and some potatoes, occasionally some carrots as well. So the food can come from a long way away. So I'm thinking about those easily available pineapples or bananas that you find in the supermarket. They're obviously not coming from not even the south of Europe. I think even people in Spain have trouble growing pineapples. I know that you do get bananas in the Canarias, so although they're the small ones and they really are very tasty. But this leads us into the, let's say, the thinking about food supply and the fact that because of the density of population now there are so many people, it's quite clear that you no longer can only live off what you can grow in your garden or what you can grow locally, because if you add in factors such as seasonality, it's quite clear that you are not able to access all of the different types of food that you would need to have a healthy, balanced diet and survive, just simply relying on what comes from the local fields. And some people live in areas where there are no local fields. So, for example, you may live in a mountainous area where you may have dairy pasture, but you can't just live off cheese and milk. You do need fruit and vegetables. So food is also it's also not just the stuff on your plate, but it's also thinking about the supply. As I said, we're going to look in a lot more detail about the broader food system a little bit in another session a little bit later. So thinking about food that is grown out of season, for example, the fact that we are able to grow large amounts of food in greenhouses, which is definitely a useful thing, because it allows farmers to extend the growing season. Greenhouses allow for a lot more control over the quality of the produce, although some people may argue that perhaps the quality of the taste, or the quality of the quality of the taste is maybe not so good. But we do have to remember that part of this is that there are many people in the world, and we need to produce a lot of food, a lot of materials to supply people. Okay, so but of course, I think we also recognize that food production, let's call it industrial food production, I think. Although obviously when I use the word industrial, I mean large scale. It obviously has a big impact on the environment, because it does require a lot of space. So one of the things we may look at in a later session is the idea of food supply from local initiatives in cities, so the so-called sustainable cities, which these ideas, which were sort of fairly fringe, fairly on the edge of madness, if you like, are starting to become more and more accepted as not only, let's say, possible alternatives, because I think one of the things that will become clear is that it's not a case of either or. What we need is flexibility, and we need a range of ways of addressing the food supply, the problems of food supply for cities. So having large-scale monoculture, where you just grow one type of crop, is simply something which is needed for the number of people that are on the planet now. At the same time, having ways of technologically improving yields, improving the amount of food that is grown, and the quality in terms of the vitamins and the energy that is found in the crops is also a part of the let's say part of the equation. So we talk about the so-called Green Revolution, which was back in the 1960s, 1970s, when agriculture made some really major changes, major strides in terms of let's say, in terms of improving yields above all. But of course, this comes at a cost. So, for example, if we're dealing with fertilizers, which, if you're growing lots of stuff, the soil gets exhausted. You need fertilizers, but of course, fertilizers are industrial, and in and of themselves, they're fairly simple. They're fairly simple compounds. They're fairly simple molecular substances, let's say. But in order to make them on the scale which is required, we need to engage in industrial chemistry. And there's nothing evil about this, of course. It's just that if you use the fertilizers in the wrong way, you can have quite drastic effects on local ecosystems, the eutrophication. Also, we have to think about the the energy which is needed to process foods, the energy which is needed to transport foods. So there's a lot of, let's say, even in this part of the, let's say, the environmental system, there's a lot of factors. There are a lot of factors which we need to take into account, and the overall impact of these different factors. Sometimes we can see as in the results of things going not quite right. So, for example, roses grown in Kenya. We don't eat roses, of course, but roses grown in Kenya and flown to Europe. Food which is produced halfway around the world and it's transported. Apples grown in South America and shipped to Europe when they're normally out of season in Europe. So this is part of the global economic system, which maybe we need to address at some point. Okay, so coming to the foods themselves. Some of you may have come across a term which is called superfood. Superfoods are particular types of food which are extremely rich in particular types of nutrient, which are let's say highly prized. So, for example, black currants, which are these guys here, are particularly rich in vitamin C, and vitamin C is obviously an extremely useful vitamin because it protects us against scurvy. Scurvy, which is a disease of the connective tissues, is one of those things which used to be a real problem for mariners, for seagoing, for people sailing on long distances on ships, because it's caused by a lack of fresh vegetables, and in particular a lack of this vitamin C, which is required for a correct biosynthesis of the connective tissue. That's your collagen and other types of components which are involved in your skin and your muscles. So superfoods are a class of well, it's a class. It's a name. It's not a real class. It's a name which is given to certain types of molecules, certain types of fruits, or certain types of foods. And you have things like they may contain antioxidants. They may contain healthy fats rather than saturated fats. Fiber, of course, fiber is vitally important for digestion, and there may be a range. There may be a range of other components, phytochemicals of various descriptions, which are supposed to bring beneficial advantages to the person who eats them. Now, I think in many cases it's true that blackcurrants contain a lot of antioxidants. It's also true they contain a lot of fiber. It's also true they contain a lot of vitamins. So they are generally quite healthy. As organisms, we are programmed to seek out sugar, because in the natural world, sugar is actually rather difficult to come across, in the sense that you find it in berries and fruits which are ripening and which are ripe, but it's not something that you find in a lot of, let's say, freely available in a lot of other plants. So we have a particular problem with sugar, for example. So looking at what we actually have in our food, though, because quite often people will say, I only want organic food, I only eat organic food, and okay, organic has a very particular meaning in the food system, because it, at least as far as the European community is concerned, it describes a system of producing food which uses a set of criteria in terms of fertilizers or not which are used, and other let's say rather technical aspects of the food production itself. But leaving aside organic, non-organic, because in the end fruit is fruit, it may be treated with pesticides to avoid insect or to keep away insect pests. It may be treated with ripening suppressants to stop it from ripening too quickly. But in the end, in the fruit itself, whatever it is, whether it's lemons or whether it's bananas, we have mixtures of chemical substances, complex mixtures of chemical substances. And this is not just fruit, it's also food in general. So if we're talking about things like flour, we are talking about complex carbohydrates, the starches, for example. If we're talking about meat, we're talking about proteins. So we have, but of course, meat is not just protein. It would actually be rather not very nice if it were just protein, because it's the cooking with the fats that are present in the meat which actually give it its tastiness, its flavour. So We have proteins, which are made of amino acids, which are vital to our health because we contain a lot of protein. We have lipids, fats, which are also vital to our health because all cells, every single cell has a membrane, and in order to do its job, the membrane has to have the correct composition. And the correct composition means having the correct balance of lipids, of fatty acids, of different types, and cholesterol. The problem is if you have too much cholesterol, but cholesterol itself is not evil. It's just cholesterol, and in fact, it's needed for several different things in the body. So the whole thing here, though, is this idea of balance. So we need a balance of all of these different components, and these components come from different food groups and different types of food, whether it's fruit or vegetables. So we've got proteins, we've got fats, we've got sugars, we've got vitamins and minerals. Now the minerals themselves are just basically dissolved salts which are absorbed as plants grow, but we need minerals too. So we need calcium, we need potassium, amongst other. We even need tiny amounts of selenium. So amongst the various elements, there are quite a number that we actually require in our diet. Okay, so diet itself, one of the confusions that this word causes for people is that it's a word which can be technical, but it can also be very general. So but surprisingly, the technical word is more used in everyday life, whereas in the sense that you talk about, are you on a diet? What type of diet are you doing? Are you doing an Atkins? Are you doing a paleo diet? Okay, are you eating rocks? Okay, whereas in reality, diet is what you eat. It's the sum total of what you eat. It could be good, it could be bad, but it's just basically what you survive on, let's say. So when we're thinking about diet, when we're thinking about talking about diet, we need to be thinking about different food groups, which food groups are present. Are they present in balanced amounts? And of course, the balance that is needed will depend on who you are, how old you are, whether you're growing, whether you're pregnant, whether you're lactating, whether you're getting a little bit older and so maybe you're not quite so active. So of course this is something which is going to change over your lifetime. So you can think about food. So I'm thinking about activities with younger children. You can get them to be thinking about what type of things it is that they eat and what is in them, what is in those things. Okay, so one of the ways of describing the molecular content of food is to think about the food pyramid. So it's the different types of food nutrients that the body needs. But of course, today it's actually very difficult to avoid. It's actually very difficult to avoid processed foods. Now, what do we mean by processed foods? Well, in reality, anything that you do to food which is changing its way of being, so that includes cooking at home, is processing. But it's clear that here we're talking about foods which are, let's say, industrially created and modified. And in particular, it's the sugary foods which are a big problem. Because sugar, as I said before, we are, as an organism, as an animal, we are exquisitely developed to, or evolved to, find sugar. The problem is that's fine in an environment in which there's not a lot of sugar around, but in a situation, or in the modern situation where sugar is available in kilos, you just have to go to the local supermarket. This is a bit of a problem, because basically there's too much of it. So in order to have a balanced diet, we need to be consuming moderate amounts of protein, as many fruit and vegetables, or as much fruit and vegetables as possible, and enough grain-based foods, so that's the rice or the wheat, the flour, to get the energy we need. But behind this we have the environment. So behind the protein, well, there's your chickens or your pigs or your cows. Where are they growing? Where do they live? Where are they raised? And how are they used in the food supply? Fruit and vegetables, well, again, what is in season, what is not in season, how much can be grown. This is the classic examples here are the tomatoes which are grown across the world in greenhouses, for example. Tomatoes typically are originally from South America, but now they're grown widely just about everywhere. It's difficult to imagine Italian cuisine without tomatoes, so I don't know what Lorenzo di Medici would have been eating, but he definitely wasn't eating spaghetti and tomato sauce, let's say. So these are things which are obviously things which do change, but as far as we're concerned here, we have there's the supply of this stuff, because it's not just for one family, it's for thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of families, millions of people that these things have to be grown for. Okay, so within this you also have, well, the protein. If we think about for example, the dairy produce, okay, dairy produce, cheese, milk, and what have you, great sources of protein comes from cows. The cows are eating grass. The grass takes space to grow. Okay, so it's a very sort of, let's say, complex. It's a very complex web. We are going to talk in a lot more detail about the pros and cons of the current situation in terms of the food system. Okay, so food pyramid. This is a typical, let's say, description of the food pyramid. We have fats and oils at the top. You don't. Well, most people, I think, don't spend their lives drinking oil. You may have more oil available, less oil available, according to where you live. But this sort of illustrates what these things are actually doing. So fats and oils are there as energy stores. We need them for membranes. We need them for various activities within the body, but we don't need a lot of them. We have the proteins, the protein sources, and again, why do we need proteins? Well, our muscles are protein, and our muscles are the actuators in our body system which are doing the work. So we do need protein, and I think this is something which maybe many people don't actually appreciate, which is that your body as it is not actually static. And I don't mean that you're fidgeting around in the chair. It's actually a biochemical system which is in continuous movement, in the sense that it is continuously replacing molecules. So the proteins that you are today are not the same proteins that you had in your body 2 months ago, because there has been a turnover within your body of these molecules, and this occurs at different rates in different tissues, in different organs, but it's constant. And part of this is to constantly adapt to the situation, to the situation around you, but it's just part of the nature of things, which is that there is a continual renewal. Okay, so your proteins, you've got your fish, your meat, your dairy, your beans, your lentils, so you have both animal protein and vegetable proteins. Okay, then you've got your fruit and vegetables, which should make up about 1/3 of what you eat. They say that fruit and vegetables are healthy. Well, they are, of course. Okay, I'm sort of joking. It's just I don't like salad very much. So what's happening here? Well, obviously you have the supplies of minerals. You have the supplies of the vitamins. Vitamins are absolutely vital for particular biochemical processes. So I'm thinking in particular about for example, the B groups, the B group of vitamins, which are absolutely fundamental for some key biochemical processes, either as coenzymes or as reactive intermediates which are used within biochemical reactions. So some of these are fundamental, and a lack of these vitamins is very, let's say, very easy to very quickly causes problems with health. The other aspect of fruit and vegetables is fiber. Fiber is undigestible material in the plant produce, and that is absolutely vital for correct intestinal health. Not only in terms of movement, but also in terms of the bacterial flora. And then we have the grains, and the grains are the flours, the flour, or your pasta type dishes, which are, it's starch basically, which are these are pasta is elaborated flour along with bread, but then you have potatoes, you also have rice. Every culture has their particular version of worked up grains which give us energy. Okay, so why do we process food? So one of the things that we may think about is processing is you can associate it with McDonald's, or you can associate it with highly elaborate things which you may find in your supermarket. However, that's not necessarily true. All food is processed to some degree, and that can be from simple washing to eliminate surface dirt and surface parasites. It could be to make something which is edible. So, for example, I'm thinking about this. I found this photograph because I like rhubarb, in Italian rabarbaro, which is when I was a kid, my mum had a huge, it was enormous, a huge rhubarb plant at the bottom of the garden. I mean, it was enormous. The leaves were about ½ a metre across. I mean, it was just enormous. And it had these beautiful red sticks. The only thing is, as a kid, I hated it. It was horrible stuff, because the thing is, to make it edible, you have to stew it up with quite a bit of sugar, and it's still got quite a tart sort of taste. But I think it's one of those things that as an adult you start to appreciate. It's not going to kill you, but it's, if you eat it raw, but it's not particularly nice. Pasta, surprisingly, you can eat it raw, but it's actually rather difficult because you need to cook it to soften it. Cassava, which is not something we typically find in Europe, has to be processed. If it isn't, this will cause you serious problems because it contains hydrogen cyanide. Okay, so some foods do need some processing, but above all, why do we process? Well, we process to make the food last longer, or to make it better in some way, and above all, to eliminate potential problems, and to make it. And if we're talking about processing in terms of cooking, well, the idea behind cooking is to make the food a lot easier to digest, and it is thought that one of the big steps in human evolution, along with communication and language, was the ability to cook food, because by cooking food you get energy from it, you get the nutrients from it a lot quicker than if, for example, you were a python and you eat a goat and you have to lie still for 2 weeks in order to digest it. So cooking is a sort of a pre-digestion, apart from the fact that it also makes things a lot tastier. So cooking is a process, yes. Yes, it is a process. Everything is a process. Yeah. So I don't know who Me News Viola is, but I don't have your name there, so I can't see. But yes, to answer your question, cooking is a process. Okay, so do you cook? Can you cook? So every time we are cooking, or we're following a recipe, just remember, it's not just the food industry that does it, whoever the food industry is. And it's as simple as putting together the ingredients. So a bit of onion, a bit of oil, a bit of onion, some rice, and a bit of white wine, and a little bit of risotto comes out if you do it correctly after about half an hour. So you may have a favorite recipe. Everybody, well, most people who cook have their particular favorite thing that they like making. What is it? What is your favorite? What is your favorite dish? Okay, so of course, processing in any form, and this is whether it's industrial or whether you do it in your house, is something which is going to alter the nutrient value of the food. So in particular, the nutrient value of the vitamins is something which is particularly mac and cheese is the easiest to make and the tastiest to eat after work. Well, I suppose it is if someone else is making it for you. It's the water-soluble vitamins which are particularly problematic in the sense that they are very easy to destroy. They're very easy to break down, and so one of the key things in preparing food is to be able to retain as much of the nutrient value in the food as possible. I suppose, thinking about it these days, you could get away with just eating just about anything and supplement with vitamins, because of course vitamins are just chemicals, and you can get your vitamins from a bottle of pills if you wish. But cooking is a bit more than just nutrients. Is a bit more than just getting the value, let's say the nutritious value from the food. There's more to it. It's a cultural thing, and so the answer to the question is, should you put pineapple on a pizza? And I don't wish to open a big debate on the chat, but if you're coming from an Italian point of view, the answer is absolutely not. Pizza should absolutely be a pineapple-free zone. However, I did read an article I think it was last year, about how come pineapple ended up on pizza anyway. Because if you think about it, it's not an obvious thing to put on a pizza. You can think of all sorts of things to put on pizzas: salami, peppers, anything. But pineapple does seem a little bit odd. And apparently, this thing. If you have local pineapples, why not? Less carbon footprint. Yes, that's true. So apparently, it was born in Hawaii, not surprisingly, straight after the war, straight after the Second World War, and there were two brothers who had a pizzeria, which wasn't doing very well, and they were also having trouble getting hold of materials, getting hold of stuff to put on the pizzas, and they just tried it. And apparently it was a big hit with the sailors and the soldiers at the local army base. And so the Hawaiian pizza was born, and the whole thing just became history, as they say. Okay, so what I'd like to do, I like pizza chicken plus pineapples. Pizza, chicken, and pineapples. Now that is an interesting combination. Whatever floats your boat. Okay, so what I'd like to do now, so we've talked a bit about food, and this is just a very sort of brief introduction. We're going to look in a lot more detail at the food supply and how food supply impacts the environment. So we're just sort of laying the groundwork here. We're now going to move on to look at something about technologies that we use every day. So you might have heard of the so-called Internet of Things. If you look around you, how many things have got plugs on them, how many things are connected to the internet, and particularly if you bought appliances recently over the last few years, you may find that not only do you get the appliance, but you also get an app, and you can control this thing from your smartphone. So what we have is this situation where the technology and the level of technology penetration in everyday life is getting more and more invasive. So here I'm being careful to note that I'm talking about technologies more than just the internet, though, because technology has a much broader, obviously it has a much broader meaning. To give you a definition, a definition would be that technology is the application of scientific knowledge for practical purposes. So just thinking about all of those different types of machines which can or which do work for us, whether it's automatic or whether it's semi-automatic. So technology is a fundamental part of everyday life. So if you think about the house, so which pieces of technology do you use? Maybe you have a microwave oven, maybe you have a normal just a normal classical gas oven. Maybe you have gas rings. Maybe you use an induction cooker. So if you look at the language here, this is quite clearly. Sorry, wouldn't it be better to eat pizza and the pineapple? Yeah, I think that's true. But anyway, sorry, I was just getting distracted. Microwave, of course, this is very physical. This is from physics. It's the name has entered into, let's say, everyday usage, but it refers to a part of the electromagnetic spectrum. At the beginning, and I think some people still perhaps follow this idea that microwaves are somehow bad. Is it good to use a microwave? I knew this was going to come. Yes, it is. There's nothing wrong with a microwave at all. Now, I don't work for microwave manufacturers. Just happen to use them for a long time. I think the problem with microwaves has been that when they first came onto the market, it was microwave radiation. Well, it's the radiation thing which people got concerned about. It's not radiation, it's electromagnetic radiation. Well, if we're going to be a little bit upset about that, we have to think about visible light. Our televisions, it's all just electromagnetic radiation. So what microwaves do is they just make the molecules in your food, the water molecules in particular in your food, jiggle around a little bit more. That causes heat, and it causes the food to heat up. So it's not like you're turning them into radioactive sprouts or cabbage or whatever. Okay, so it's just exciting the molecules, and this is exactly what you do if you put them in a pan of boiling water, or if you put them in a frying pan. The only difference is that it takes you a bit longer and a lot more energy. What about an induction cooker? Induction cookers are fun. But of course they don't work with all of your pans. You need to have a particular type of pan. You need to have a steel pan with iron, okay, or iron and nickel, because you need to set up an induction current, or you need to set up an induction current in the metal, and that causes heat, which is transferred to the water. Okay, so these are modern, let's say, modern techniques just for transferring energy, essentially. Induction, we're talking about magnetic induction, electromagnetic induction. Yeah. Okay. Now there's just a comment here about some doctors told one of my friends with cancer not to use it. I can't say more other than anything other than it's just normal. It's just a bit more energetic than infrared. That's all. It's between infrared and radio waves, so it's not ionizing. It's not able to ionize. Anyway, okay. So what about televisions? Have you got a smart television? Does your television, like mine, it keeps insisting on trying to get onto the internet, but I refuse to give it the password. Is your washing machine intelligent, whatever intelligence means in this case? Is it able to sense the load, etc.? Does this make your life any easier? And well, yes, of course, these things do. Well, maybe not television, but certainly washing machines and certainly dishwashers are able to save a lot of household chores, which and this is, I'm not trying to be I'm not being sexist, but were traditionally allocated to the lady of the house. And of course, these things have freed up a lot of time. Now, one of the questions that's always asked about dishwashers is, is it better to use a dishwasher or is it better to wash by hand? And the answer is that the dishwashers are much more efficient in their use of water. So why is that? Well, it's because if you think about it, you're actually filling the thing. If you do it correctly, of course, you fill the thing with dirty dishes, which might be 3 or 4 sinkfuls. And the amount of water that the dishwashers are using is relatively contained. One of the possible problems is associated with the use of the pods, which release microplastics. But if you're not using pods, if you're using liquids, this may not be such a problem. But just taking this example, you have technologies, you have advantages and disadvantages, and this is true for all technologies. And on a wider scale of things, it's not. I don't think it's sustainable to say that technology is bad, because it's not. It's how it's used. Not all technologies are useful. Some technologies have their time. So at this particular moment in history, we are living starting to live, even if it's somewhat late, a transition over to what is sometimes called the green economy, an energy transition over towards, for example, electric vehicles, electric cars, which we will examine in another session, and which is not as straightforward as it seems. We have the hybrids. I just noticed the other evening on television the number of adverts for hybrids. Well, 2 years ago there were very few hybrid vehicles available. Now it seems every manufacturer has their versions, but hybrid technology is very much something which is a stepping stone, and it's a stepping stone to fully electric vehicles, simply because the whole idea is that at some point no one will be burning fossil fuels in a car anymore, simply because it won't be efficient. But I had a conversation with a guy who he works for a famous German motor manufacturer in the technical commercial department. He was telling me that the thing that people don't realize about electrical vehicles is this: that at the moment an electric car looks like a car, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to look like a car. It's just that how these things can be configured can be so different that it would be difficult to sell. Okay, so we're sort of living this transition thing, and he was saying that at some point in the future, in the not so distant future, there will be cars and there will be vehicles which no longer look like cars as we recognize them. Why is this? Well, because the technology is such that the motors in an electric vehicle do not have to be put in the same way as a traditional car. You don't have a petrol tank. You don't have all of those tubes with connecting fuel to. You don't have all of those tubes connecting fuel tanks to places where the energy is being used and produced. Okay, and he said that this changes completely the way that a car can be thought of. Okay, so I thought that was quite interesting, because I hadn't really thought about it. I just thought, well, cars will always be cars, but not necessarily true. Okay. Now, someone's just put I'm just going to take a moment to comment on something on the chat. Technologies make us less creative. Anyway, they save a lot of time, yet do we manage that extra time wisely? Irina, I don't quite agree with that, in the sense that I agree with the time saving, but I think that technologies can make us more creative. Not necessarily less creative, but again, it's how you use it and what you use it for. So certainly, well, to be honest with you, there's not a lot of creativity in washing dishes after a dinner, I think. So it's much better to stick them in the washing machine and go and watch a film. Stick them in the dishwasher, not the washing machine. Don't put them in the washing machine. That will break them. Okay, go and watch a film, I think, or go and do something else. Yeah. But at the same time, I do understand what you mean, though, that in some cases it seems like the technology makes us a passive consumer of something rather than an active protagonist. Okay, so I've waffled on about advantages and disadvantages of technology, but I think the thing is that it's a very broad area, and it's always, I think, whenever we have a scientific or a technological thing which is proposed to us or which is in front of us, we have to think about what advantages and disadvantages this thing can bring. This leads us on to let's say a topic which I'm just going to slightly open the lid of the container, but trying not to be Pandora. I'm going to sort of close it really quickly. Okay, I'll comment on that in a minute. Yeah, so one of the things when you're thinking about the application of technologies within society is can be, and particularly when we're talking about technologies which influence the environment, is that sometimes in order to understand the arguments you need to have a certain, let's say, level of critical thinking, but also scientific reasoning and scientific knowledge, and sometimes that can be a problem. It can be a problem. So, okay, I'm just going to put the lid back on that Pandora's box for the minute, and we'll come to that in another session. So, to me, traditional ways of cooking and washing are healthier. Well, allora, what could I say? I mean, so for example, we made some bread this morning, and now you can make bread by hand, but there's also a dough attachment on the food processor. It makes a lot less mess. It makes a lot less mess in the kitchen. Takes you a lot less time to do it, and the bread comes out fantastic anyway because you know what's gone in the bread. So I think we do have to be careful about. Sometimes I think tradition is fine. Sometimes tradition is best maybe left as tradition. But anyway, people have different, let's say, different ways. And so, for example, cooking in a family, cooking could be a social activity. In which case, letting a robot do it doesn't maybe make it quite so much fun. Okay, what about computers? I mean, here I am using this is a ThinkPad from it's about 8 years ago, something like this. So it's just about surviving with Windows 10 at the moment. But computers, we all have. We all have computers, I think, because if you're not watching this on a computer, you will certainly be using a tablet, smartphone, but you will almost certainly be preparing materials and things for classes using computers. So thinking about computers, how many of us actually remember these things? This is going back to the early 1990s. Because not at that time computed the idea of 1 terabyte of SDD running at 3.6 megahertz and 32 gigabytes of RAM was just absolute science fiction. I think this guy probably was lucky if it had 556K of RAM. But anyway, how do you use your computer? Many of you will use your computers for work, okay? But maybe you take photographs and maybe you download them to your computer and you play with them and you modify them and you cut them and you share them. Do you rip CDs, DVDs? Do you share music like that? Do you have any particular programs which breaks, especially now during distance learning? Well, I think more than anything else, that's not so much the computer itself. Probably it'll be the network is not up to it. That's what Stefano. Whenever I join these, he always complains. But I can see you. I can't see you. You're freezing up. And it'll be the connection. But anyway, computers, I think it's one of those things which it's difficult to avoid. Now, someone's just said now mobile has a lot of the same features as a computer. It's handier and more comfortable to use whenever, wherever. Now this brings us into a couple of different things. One is, and I'm not really going to go there, one is the idea of when do you switch off? When do you switch off? Because this stuff is incredibly invasive. But I'll leave that there. As far as the comment about, well, essentially modern smartphones are computers. The only problem is that you have a tiny screen. Now, these days you can get adapters which allow you to plug into a normal screen, and you can use these with mice, and essentially they become computers. Now, personally, I've not tried to do heavy document work on these, but I know people who have. So, you know, you have this. We have this blurring over now of things between a mobile phone and a static or a laptop computer. So we are definitely sort of moving to a situation where these things are starting to become less and less, let's say, defined. Okay, so what about the smartphone? And this sort of leads us into this idea of you have a computer in your pocket which is able to do some really quite extraordinary things. Now, as a sort of let's say as a sort of a sciencey sort of person, sometimes doing science projects with schools, I found the smartphone to be an absolutely incredible source of data, because smartphones are full of sensors, and you can do all sorts of sciencey experiments just using a smartphone. And some of these are quite simple, some of these are actually quite sophisticated. And so you probably picked up that I look at the smartphone very much from the point of view of as a tool. It's a way of me doing something, whether that's getting information. So rather than taking a photograph of a flower and sending it to my mother-in-law so she can identify it for me, I now I use Planter, whatever it's called, and I take a photograph of the flower, and within seconds I have the species name and where it lives and how to look after it. So smartphones can be quite amazing things. But what do you use it for? What do you do with it? Are you so attached to it that it's become like a third arm? It's part of your being. What about social media, for example? So social media is something which has become more and more and more, and I'll use the word invasive, I think is probably the best way to describe it, because it's something which is, let's say, it's become more and more present in our lives, but we are also becoming more and more cognizant of how it can influence things, not necessarily in a positive way around us. And this brings us to, what about small children with smart devices, whether they're tablets or whether they're smartphones? We talk so quite often, and I think I don't have the data about the demographic of this group, okay, but I can imagine that there is a sort of let's say there's an age range. Maybe not everyone, maybe not everyone is as old as me, but there will be, let's say, an age range of some youngish people and sort of a bit older people, and I think that according to your age, you will have a different relationship to your phone, different relationship to the technology, and a different relationship to the idea of social media. I think maybe the older people amongst us will probably have a more functional relationship with the thing. It's what can this device do for me? If it can't do anything for me, well, okay, it's just a phone. Maybe younger people are much more tied up with the let's say the digital identity. So smartphones, something that we can't live without, but maybe sometimes it would be good to try a little bit. Okay, but it's even harder to work because you can't let everything. Now hold on a minute. I can't see all of the messages. That one's a bit okay. Hold on a minute. Okay, so I'm just going to comment on something that's come up on the chat here. It's very easy to procrastinate on smartphones and tablets, so we try to use the computer for all the work, but it's even harder to do work over it because you can access literally everything on your laptop. Okay, well, it's just another gateway to that wonderful wild world of the World Wild Web, if you like. So yes, of course. Okay, so thinking about smartphones. Even banks using it to, yeah, okay, yeah, absolutely, no, yeah, okay. When I was saying about age-related, so I was more relating to sort of looking for apps and programs to do particular things. So I suppose I'm really sort of thinking in a sciencey way. Okay. Okay, so if we think about the sorts of actions that you might use with smartphones, and this is absolutely normal. You're tapping, you're swiping, you're scrolling. Well, you scroll up and down on a computer screen as well. You're plugging it in, you're turning it off, you're texting, messaging someone, you're taking photos, recording, replying, you're browsing. Or you're surfing, as it used to be called. I think browsing is probably the way we describe it these days. So how much time do you spend on your phone every day? Too much, I think. That's the answer for most people. Do you ever leave it somewhere and sort of you get a vague sense of panic? So, oh, where's it gone? Where's it gone? I need to. And you ask your partner to phone around the house so that you can find out where it is. So I think one of the aspects of the smartphone is that it's very addictive. And technology in general can become quite addictive. Sometimes because it helps us do things. Sometimes simply because it's like, as they say, the devil will find work for idle hands to do. So it's just another thing to play with. Okay, what about the internet? Because of course the internet is also definitely it's in the background to all of this technology that we are surrounded with every day. How do you use the internet? What do you browse for? What do you look for? What's your favorite website? Do you ever find yourself commenting or do you write a blog? Maybe you keep a blog. Does anybody here keep a blog? What do you blog about? Is it something to do with work, or is it something to do with a hobby that you have? Is it something that you like talking about? I think one of the aspects about the internet which is positive is the possibility of finding like-minded people in different places across the world. So you may have a very specific hobby or a very specific set of interests, and you can find other people with whom you can share that interest. Now, from a language point of view, this is interesting because it's one of the drivers for certainly for English for many people, simply because English is the sort of it's the default language of the web, in the sense that the coding, all of that coding stuff, and here you can just sort of see this stuff here. This looks like Java, I think. It's all a sort of English, but to explain this, you would need to be using a lot of English language in order to, if you're communicating maybe with someone in America or in Japan, for example, unless you are a Japanese speaker, which is probably not very likely, you will choose to discuss things in English. And just from personal experience, quite a number of younger people, sort of adolescents in particular, who do gaming, you talk to them and say, yeah, this guy's obviously done quite a bit of studying. He's got a good level. He's got a good vocabulary, and you find out that actually it's because they play games in international settings, and they're constantly exchanging messages with people from all over the world. So this is, I think, this is definitely a positive thing. What about buying stuff online? Do you buy things online? I think most people do. Certainly, what's happened over the last 2 years with this COVID business, there has been, let's say, an acceleration of the use of online shops, online buying, and in some cases this is a good thing, in some cases maybe it's not such a good thing. What about children's access to internet? Because of course internet is can be a pretty dangerous place to be. What about working? Well, of course, the technology has definitely changed the way we've worked. I would never have imagined being able to do something like this. I mean, I'm talking to people. I don't know how many people, how many different countries are involved here, but certainly being able to do something like this back in the 1990s was unheard of, unless we were in a room at an international conference, which was difficult to organise, and it would take months, if not years, to put together. So, so I can definitely say for me personally, technology has definitely changed the way I think about how to work, and also actually the physical aspects of the work itself, the preparing the materials, the preparing the experiments, and what have you. But maybe some of you out there are techno people. Are you able to code? Can you write programs? Do you play with websites? Do you mess around with Java? Okay, can you do stuff? This photograph intrigued me because this is a lady who she's working from home, and to be honest with you, it does look like a doll, but I think it is actually a real baby. Now, I think from let's say from an ergonomic point of view, that this cannot be good. Sitting on the floor with a laptop in front of you like this is not the best ergonomics. But anyway, apart from let's say the details, this is the type of thing which let's say the being able to being able to have the flexibility to work in this way. Now, I'm just looking at looking at a couple of comments on the chat here, because I think, right, okay, let me just have a look at this. Okay, so completely, it's been definitely changed and adapted to our new reality. Okay, right, Maria, I agree with you. I think this is sad too. Okay, but as you say, but it is life. Now, of course, this is a photograph and this is a context. It's just sort of out of context because we don't really know what was. It may even have been posed. Okay. Now, someone says she's multitasking. Well, multitasking is one of those things which seems to be expected more and more from people, and particularly young people, and that is also part of, let's say, the promise of technology, that it will help you do many things and live your life to the fullest. I think these things are debatable, to be honest with you, and I must say that I would agree with you, Maria, that I find this situation rather strange. Okay, but anyway, the idea here was just to stimulate some ideas. So for if anyone is a techno person out there, if they want to say what they do on the web, that would be good. Okay, so yeah, this is a phrase that I find myself using a lot. It's that I describe it as the promise of technology. Now, I knew I would get this comment at some point. So Paola says, but women are always multitasking. Now, I'm glad that you've made that comment, Paola, because I wanted to make it, but I didn't want to appear sexist. Okay, so this is something which I think is definitely something which people know. Okay, the promise of technology. Everything's fine until it doesn't work. So I'm thinking about Free Conference Call, which is a pretty good piece of software. Every so often it freezes, but there again, so does Meet, so does Skype, so does Zoom. It's all, and to be honest with you, I don't think it would matter whether I have an Intel i7 or i9 multi-core. It's still going to do the same thing. So what happens when it goes wrong? Can you handle it? How do you handle the technological blackouts? So I'm just thinking about our family in particular. I'm not a techie by any means. I sort of manage to make my way around computers occasionally, but every so often there is an update, a Windows update, and all of a sudden the printer doesn't work, or the disk drive hasn't updated properly, and then I get phone calls from my daughters who say, "Papa, it's not printing anymore." Okay, so this usually leads to a frantic team viewer session and sort of rooting around in the bowels of the operating system, which is well. It is what it is anyway. So this, I really sort of, I really, let's say, feel for this situation. Also, those stupid websites that you've put all of the things in and you press the button and it starts you again, and it's like, where do you go? It's like a Kafka nightmare. Okay, so. Okay, social media. So we've got lots of different types of social media that we may use. I imagine that many people here use things like Facebook for private sharing things with family. I mean, I'm thinking about our own situation, which is having elderly relatives on WhatsApp, for example. But also having them being able to contribute. So it's not just sort of passive. It's they are active members of the thing. I think it's fantastic, considering that families these days are quite often spread around and in different parts of the country, or different parts of the world. And I think that it's definitely a positive. It's definitely a positive thing for some people. Having said that, the wider use of social media, of course, and we just have to think about the debate which occurred during the American elections last year, but the ongoing debate in general about the influence, potential influence of these social media apps on society at large, is actually an important point. As far as the environment is concerned, you can sort of put this in a context of sharing information. There is a lot more information and ability to act being by having access to these sorts of tools. Okay, so you may be a smartphone zombie. I doubt that you are. You may be falling asleep after an hour and a half of me talking away, but we've got some problems here, which you may have come across too. You've got the zombies. You see them every day, and the dangerous ones are the ones that are in the cars. You see people. Well, you hear about people being addicted to these things, and I think that we can all relate to that. You've got different types of phobias related to not being involved, fear of missing out, FOMO-phobia. You've got phubbing, which is where you snub someone, where you exclude them. You've got selficide. Now, selficide is actually it's funny, but it's not funny, because people actually do themselves great harm and sometimes kill themselves. The famous fantastic photograph from the cliff edge in New Zealand, followed by the fall of the person as they take one step back when they shouldn't. So yeah, smartphones are what they are. Okay, Internet of Things. So we've got everything connected to everything. You may have come across this word domotics. Now, this is I know the word in Italian, domotica. I didn't think it existed in English, but it does. Basically, domus, from the Latin meaning house, and this last part, ticks, comes from robotics. The word robot itself has a very interesting etymology, but putting these two things together, we have the idea of the smart house. Now, if anyone, I'm just going to write something on the chat here. If anyone has a little bit of time to read this story, this is one of my absolute all-time favorite short science fiction stories. It's called The Veld by Ray Bradbury, and it is it's a very interesting idea about where interactive technology can go. Smart house. Okay, so of course you have security. You have the idea of your house full of all of these technological riches is obviously going to be a target, so you need to protect it. So you can have you can have cameras all over the place, cameras that you can watch from your telephone. So you can go on holiday to Australia and watch as someone breaks into your house in Milan. So we've got lots of possibilities, but the thing here is that we have ever more invasion of our personal space with these technologies. Okay. I'm not going to say anything about that one. Okay, so yeah, so we've got some phrasals, the usual stuff that we get with English. So we plug in, we print something out, we log on, or we log in, we log off, we switch on, switch off, we sign up, we click on, we hack into, we boot up, we drag and we drop. Okay, there's all sorts of phrasals. So opt in, opt out. These are typical on your forms. Wiping clean. You wipe a hard disk clean when you're about to give it to someone else. You've got ad blockers. So you've got spam. You've got plugins. You've got pop-ups. It's sort of quite a language in and of its own. In and of its own context, let's say. Okay, so I think this is today. I mean, this is sort of finished off what we started last time. The idea was to start to set the scene about environment, because the whole thing here is that whether we are talking about technology whether we're talking about food, whether we're talking about transport, whether we're talking about our relationships with the various aspects of our lives. We talked about stuff, we talked about things. One of the key characteristics of life in the modern world is complexity. And we have complexity which is around every aspect of our life, whether it's technological complexity, whether it's complexity associated with the environment. And if we think about the food supply, for example, we think about where our food is coming from. It's quite clear that because of the number of people on the planet, let's say the way to keep, things, modern society running, is no simple matter, and there are no simple solutions. And it's not enough to say the traditional ways were best. Well, the traditional ways were best when the traditional world was when the world was 50 or 100 years ago, and that was the way the world was, and that was the number of people that were in the world. Those worlds still had their problems. In fact, they had really quite serious problems which from in many cases we have moved on from. Okay. So I think if there's one word which would sum up all of this, it's complexity. And what we're going to do is we're going to sort of shift this. The complexity is sort of overarching. It's not overarching. It's more like it's structural. It's underneath. But we're going to shift our focus here, and we're going to see how all of these different parts feed into environment and our thinking about the environment. So it's about 6:10 now. So if anyone has any questions, I'd like to sort of open the. Okay, so Stefano is just giving you permission to unmute yourselves. So if anyone has any questions or comments,
silence.
Silence is golden.
Okay, so I'm trying to connect, but here very bad sound. We have 112 people attending. I'm sorry. Could you turn off your? Someone making a lot of noise with the microphone.
Yeah, it sounds like someone's sending a Morse code message.
I'm trying to see who's doing it, but it doesn't work. Oh, here is it. Mute. Okay, it was Elsin, and your microphone doesn't work properly. So, please turn on your camera and ask any question.
Or comments. The idea is also to have, to take comments.
Okay, stop sharing the screen so we can see everyone in the gallery mode. Lovely.
Okay.
Let's see gallery mode now. Okay, we should see a lot of friends from different countries.
No.
Now you see them.
I can't actually see them.
Oh gosh, you click on view and choose gallery mode.
Right, view. Hold on a minute.
Yeah, a lot of
view. Okay, right. Okay, gallery mode. Right. Okay, where are we?
I see. Okay.
Ah, right. Okay, yeah. I can see lots of people. Well, some.
Very few with the camera on, anyway. with the webcam on. Anyway, welcome. So, Gordon is our friend. Gordon Kennedy is available for you. And you can make any question. You don't dare to make any question, don't you? Try to imagine they're not so friendly with the English language in some cases. Especially who said that? Ah, Maria. Okay. They're nodding. But we are not, this is not an exam. We're here just,
no, absolutely.
And Gordon is such a friendly teacher. That
okay, can I just ask? I mean, since we've got, does anybody here do any blogging? Does anybody do a blog? No.
Oh, pity.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Diana. Okay,
Diana.
right. Diana, can you tell us something about it?
Hello.
Hello.
So I was doing blogging, but that wasn't about my school. It was more about my crafting, knitting and stitching, something like that.
Okay. So do you still do it?
No, sadly I stopped. I have no time for that.
Yeah, so it's one of those situations where, let's say, the technology allows you to, but other things in your life conspire to make sure that you don't have enough time to actually do anything. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I had some followers, but now I just left it, so not doing now. Like few years, I'm not doing it.
Did you have people from other countries around the world?
Sure. I don't know how they found my blog, but sometimes they just finding somehow, following, commenting on the crafts or asking questions, how we did that. So that was like in the communication.
So can I just ask you, Diana, whereabouts are you?
From where I am?
Yeah.
Lithuania.
Ah, okay. No, because I was sorry. I was looking at your surname and I was wondering how to say. I was wondering how to say it because it looks a bit complicated.
Yeah, it's not easy. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, because I think that's again, this is one of those things because you have the idea that internet is either good or bad. But of course, it's one of those things. I mean, the idea of being able to have a community, even a small community, around something which is extremely specialized is fantastic because you could have followers in Japan and Uruguay and who knows where, and it's people who are interested in the same stuff. Whereas without the internet, well, you're sort of on your own. That's great. That's really good. Has anybody else tried blogging, or does anybody else follow someone or follow a particular thing?
Come on.
Well,
I got my own blog. And since 20 or 15 years already, with 100,000 followers. But it's mostly about sociology. I'm analyzing systems, and I publish very, very seldom an article, once every 2 months.
Once every 2 months, okay.
But they are mostly researchers.
Ah, okay, yeah. So that's a bit more sort of academic, isn't it?
Not really. It's about society, so it's not a blog for fun. It's just maybe complain about some laws, or just complain about some decision, or about saying thank you about some European laws, or anything. So there is different sections about what I like, what I don't like, the values in which I'm believing in, and so on.
Okay.
So, anyone else? I see the microphone. Gulai, you turn on the microphone. I know. Okay, let's turn it off. It's too noisy. If you want to speak, you can turn on the microphone and ask to Gordon, for example, if he has a blog.
Do I have a blog?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, it's quite amazing.
No, but the thing is, Stefano, people have said to me I should, but I think I'm sort of in the situation of Diana, which is, it's not that I could find time for it, but my fear is that I would end up sort of getting sucked into it. I don't know, but yeah, maybe I should. Maybe I should start an environmental English blog.
Yeah, that would be really, really interesting. It would be.
Okay, I'll make a note of it, Stefano.
If you need any help to set it up, you know, we got plenty in our server. It's very easy, very easy. There are some online free services like altervista.org, and you can create a blog in 5 minutes without any expenses for free forever.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll look into that. Look into that. I'm not promising though, guys. I'm not promising.
We will follow you anyway. Okay, nobody dared to say anything. Come on,
yeah. Well,
it's
you know
such a
what it
beautiful
is.
name from Turkey. Yazici.
I have some other mind. I think nowadays we are all kind of bloggers because we are using a lot of social media. For example, I'm a teacher and I'm having a parents group where I'm sharing every day what we do, what we need to do.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's faster than write a message or call. You're just posting things and parents know what they need to do, what the homeworks are. It was like when we were on lockdown. Now we are 4th week at school, back to school. So it stopped for now. But but when we were on lockdown, it was very handy, and I think it's kind of blogging too, because you posting kids' jobs, pictures, and they are answering, commenting. It's something like that.
Diana, can I ask you? Do you think that there is a sort of do you think that there is space? Okay, so the lockdown forced everything. Okay, do you think there is space for that type of let's say use of technology as a way to enhance the relationship between the schools and the teachers and the parents?
You mean somewhere else?
No. I'm saying that because you just said that during the lockdown you were doing this because basically you had to, but now that you're back at school, you've sort of you've reduced.
It didn't stop at all. We still have the group.
Okay.
The group is private. Only kids and parents can see it.
Okay.
And some of school managers, but it's not stopped. So if I need to post something, I'm using. It's much more faster to find parents on Facebook.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean that sounds. It sounds like a positive use of the technology, which is I think is a good thing.
One thing is not right because kids can't have accounts. Actually, if you will think about the rules on Facebook, little kids like 10 years old, 7 years old, they can't have an account.
No.
But they do.
No.
But they do.
Yeah, well, that's the failure of Facebook, and we know that just from what you read in the press that many of these big tech companies are, let's say, promoting particular policies when in fact they're not actually doing anything about how to manage the policies properly. We just have to imagine the example of the hate speech and what have you from Facebook and also from some of the other providers, Instagram, etc., etc. So again, I would say that's the promise of technology, but that's not really. When I say promise of technology, I actually mean that the machine is going to do something great for you, when in fact it actually causes you more trouble. That's a different thing. No, that's a good point. Does anybody else use social media, social networks in their school activities for communication? Yeah. No, hold on a minute. Someone. Arne, I'm not quite sure.
I'm a teacher in a kindergarten, and we have a private group as well. Mm-hmm. Where we share our activities and important information. We just all gathered in one place.
Okay. Can I ask whereabouts you are based?
Sorry?
Can I ask where do you live?
Lithuania as well as Diane.
Okay. Are you in the same school?
No.
So are you in the same city?
No.
Okay. Now, is that a policy which was promoted by the Lithuanian Ministry of Education, or is it something which has sort of developed? It was just something which is obvious to do.
It's just obvious to do it.
Okay. Yeah, because I think the other aspect of this also is that when you have situations where when you have situations where the things are mandated from the ministries, I think quite often that's when things start to go a little bit not quite so well, because the idea of the centralization of stuff doesn't necessarily work locally, let's say. And again, that's something that we're going to talk about at some point. The idea of local action, which I think is this is a good example.
Yeah, Gordon. But there is something that you have to keep in mind. That Lithuania has no mountains, first of all. It's not like Italy. 33% of the country is just made of mountains, which doesn't allow to almost any internet connection to reach those places. And second, the government, Lithuania, since 20 years ago, has provided fiber connection everywhere. So they are very much privileged because and it's a country that is hosting a lot of servers all around Europe. So they are providing services.
Yeah. This comes down to infrastructure.
Yeah, indeed.
It comes down to physical infrastructure. Yeah. Okay.
And I noticed something because I had one VSI company I opened in Lithuania in Vilnius some years ago, and internet is much cheaper in Lithuania than in any other European country I've been before, and the line was much faster indeed.
Yeah. So
in some way you are privileged and you can use it properly indeed. We have 40% of our students there are not able to reach any connection to connect.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, Stefano, I sometimes do, I've been doing some work with the technical school in Arzignano, which is up Val di Campo.
I know.
Yeah, and there, if the students are not in the school, if they're sort of back at home, there are some students, I don't know, it's like they have to crawl up walls and stand on things to get a signal. It's ridiculous. So it can be very difficult.
Yeah, it's one of the main problems. Anyway.
Okay. Anybody? Come on, you guys. Well, I can understand why it's difficult online. But anybody want to say anything else about?
Oh, we have got different countries, and I don't know.
How many different countries have we got today, Stefano?
I have no idea. I should check one by one. But I think Bulgaria is Spain, Catalan. I'm reading Carmen, which is proper Spanish. I see Lithuania, Turkish. I see Italian, a lot of Liguri, Vittoria. And North Macedonia, Maya Stratowska is Macedonian, I think. And we got almost all Europe. Because our school plastic free network, it's into another network called Nobody Less, which is spread in 40 countries from India to Argentina. So maybe someone is connected from Turkey. I see someone from Turkey, Oslem. I saw previously someone. Yes, here is she. And I think you are Oslem from Ankara or Uşak? And she's trying to turn on the microphone.
In Ankara.
In Ankara, okay. So you're connected with Gazi University in some way, or Ministry of Education, I don't know. Because we have our straight connection with Gazi University in Ankara and the Ministry of Education. That's lovely. And you know, we got Uşak. Nobody knows Uşak in Turkey, but we got some representative here, and it's famous for carpets. It's such a lovely place and wonderful. We got plenty of friends there. We have collaborated since 17 years with Uşak, Director of Education. Yeah, some crazy things that we are spread in a very, very lost places. But most of the participants have come off, so sorry for that.
I was studying in Milan by Rasmussen a few years ago. I was first, I can say there's a great internet as well. Maybe no, hold on a minute. Milan is not recognized. It's not a statistically valid sample for Italy. Milan is Milan. Milano è Milano. Okay. No, it's well, Milan has great connections.
Lovely guy.
And so yeah, we can't. It's not.
No, Milan. It's unique indeed. It's one of the most advanced technological advanced town in Italy.
Okay, Stefano.
Okay. So see you next time. Bye.